Hey everybody, welcome back to Shannon's Lumber Industry Update. I've got another interview for you this week, and this is an interesting treat. Garrett Roberson he's a weekend woodworker, like a lot of us. He's got his business HMR Woodcraft up in Michigan outside of Detroit, and he has got some wood, a lot of wood. It's one of those situations where he saw a downed tree, reached out to the landowner, and was able to get access to the tree, and has turned into quite a massive commission. And I think it's a nice little bow on our conversation about urban lumber and reclaiming urban lumber. And I wanted to bring Garrett on the show to talk about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right. I want to welcome to the show today, Garrett Roberson from HMR Woodcraft. Garrett runs his business up in Michigan, Howell, Michigan, I think, right? Some kind of in the Detroit-ish area.
Yeah,
is that right?
it's if you know where the University of Michigan is, it's about half hour north of that.
Very nice.
So
Very
a
nice.
little more metro, I don't know, Ann Arbor-ish, I guess.
Metro Ann Arbor-ish.
I mean, I live out in the middle of nowhere. So it's one of those situations where it's Howell address, but a different school system, and then a township. And, God knows what.
Yeah, I get it. I understand that. I kind of like that, actually. No one can find you that way. It's much better.
Yeah. I love it. Live out quiet. It's great.
Oh, even better. That's fantastic. So Garrett reached out to me, and I kind of like the way he put this. It's kind of we have a story that can wrap up all this kind of urban forestry that I've been harping on about and interviewing people and talking about. Garrett basically, he's a woodworker. You do this full time. Is that correct?
Nope.
Okay.
Someday I hope, but right now it's still just nights and weekends.
All right. So like most of us, in other words.
Yeah. Yep.
So typical woodworker driving down the road, sees a big tree and goes, I wonder about that. So tell us the background here. You came across this tree and
So
once upon a time, there was a tree.
Exactly. So I actually work in Howell, and Howell's, like a lot of small town cities, it's pretty old, but pretty small. And there's a mansion called the McPherson Mansion. And it was kind of like one of the first families of Howell that came in with any kind of money. And they built this huge mansion back in 1915. So in front of it is just this enormous red oak tree. I think just the trunk section before the first, split to any sort of limb was over 30 feet.
Wow.
And, I'd seen the tree 100 times, driven by it 100 times. And we had a really bad windstorm back in October of last year, and it uprooted this huge tree. So just one day when I went out for lunch, I drove past the mansion like I do, and I see, this gigantic red oak laying on its side in front of the mansion. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. And then when I got back to work, I was just kind of sitting there thinking, it would be a real shame to cut that thing up into firewood, which I could almost guarantee you was going to happen just because of kind of the environment that I live in. I mean, it's a rural area, plenty of people, using some kind of wood burning heat of some sort. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it would have eventually just came down to the owners of the mansion saying, get this thing out of here. You can have all the firewood. And it just broke my heart, to be completely honest with you.
Sure. Well, especially because it was uprooted. It's not like, it snapped in half in a storm. Like it was intact. It was just horizontal.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's hard to put into words how big this tree was. I mean, I think the rough, measurement we got across, not circumference, but diameter, was well over 40 inches. And so anyway, I got back to work, and I'm thinking about this all day. And I say, what the heck? I'm going to see if there's any way to email, whoever owns this place and just say, hey, I'm a furniture maker. Would you be at all interested in making furniture out of this tree for the mansion? The current owners actually renovated it back in 2007, and it's now actually office space. So the current owners are the Myers. They have a law firm that's based out of that building now, and then they rent out the rest of it. So, I managed to find kind of an info at McPhersonMansion.com, and I just sent him this long-winded email about it's a beautiful tree, and like woodworkers do, I'm reminiscing about how we should, show it respect and, make it into something beautiful and make it part of the history of the mansion and blah, blah, blah. And I send it out, and over a month went by. I didn't hear anything. And I just thought, yeah, they rolled their eyes at that one and move along. But the tree was still there. I drove past it all the time. So it ended up being about 4 or 5 days after Christmas of 2021. And I work in the automotive industry, so we're shut down. So I'm just sitting at home, and I get a phone call from a secretary for the Myers law firm. And she just says, Roger Myers will meet with you if you can be up here by 2:00 today.
Roger Myers?
Yeah, the owner.
The inventor, the creator of Itchy and Scratchy?
No, the lawyer.
Roger Myers, Sr. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Nice.
So anyway, so of course I, say, yeah, I'll be up there. So I go up, I meet with him. We kind of walk around the tree a little bit. I can tell he really has no idea what I'm talking about. But he did say, my wife and I, when this thing came down, we really thought that we could do something with it, but we didn't know what, and we didn't want it just cut up into firewood.
Okay.
So the fact that we were kind of already on the same page was, a really big deal to me. I was like, okay, this might be something that actually happens instead of just kind of me talking and then that's the end of it. So we look at the tree. I kind of, just give them a rough idea. Hey, maybe we can do this or we can do this. And we go back into the mansion, and they actually have a room, one of the conference rooms that was the old dining room when it was lived in by the McPherson family. And there's really nothing in there. So we go in here, and he just says, do you think there's enough wood there to make a whole room full of furniture?
Oh, my God.
And, I consider myself okay-ish woodworker. But, I figure this is my shot, right? So I just say, yeah, let's do it. I'm going to make you a whole room full of furniture out of this one tree. I knew there was enough lumber there for it.
Right.
The branches alone would have been enough lumber. Forget about the 30-foot, 40-inch wide, trunk.
And folks, I'm gonna link to Garrett's Instagram page. He's got a video there. What do you call it when you curate videos? Like his playlist, whatever Instagram calls these little playlist things.
Yeah, stories.
Stories.
Yep.
Stories. They're still called stories when they're whatever.
I think so.
Curated on his page and just entitled "The Red Oak." As he's walking around, the thing is monstrous. It's just enormous. There's probably 3 rooms of furniture.
Oh, it's, not to, I'll go back, but just to jump ahead. I mean, between the Sawyer and I, it's over 2,500 board foot.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So anyway, so I take a look at this room, and, Roger says, this room has a lot of significance. This is where President Taft ate dinner with the McPherson family. And he shows me this picture in another room of, President Taft sitting at this table. And, he's like, that's why we never did anything with it, because it kind of has more historical relevance just because this picture is here and all this. So I just say, okay, I'll do it. And it's more, one of those things, hey, put together a quote, send it over, and we'll see what happens.
Uh-huh.
So luckily, I knew a local sawyer who I buy slabs from, who's about 20 minutes away. So my first step, I call him, and I mean it's the dead of winter, and I just say, "Hey, can you go drive by the McPherson mansion and check that tree out, and let me know if you can do it, and how much is it going to cost?" So, he does what I ask. He sends me a quote. That looks good. He's confident he can handle it, and we're off and running.
Wow.
And I mean that's kind of the story of how I found it and kind of how I got the job. And then, I don't know if you want me to keep going into the process after that, but
I have lots of questions. So
yeah, of
let's
course.
go from here.
Sure.
Setting aside the sawing part, which I want to get to in a second, I'm curious. Obviously you then kind of hashed out what furniture you would be making. And that was part of your quote back to, Roger Myers, correct?
Yeah.
So was the idea to turn it into kind of back into like a dining room, or let me just, the simple question is, what are you making
Right.
out of the tree?
Sure. So he didn't really have a lot of guidance. They didn't want it to be a dining room. They wanted it to be a conference room, because they rent out a majority of the building to other people. And these are kind of the common rooms that you can use if you have a business there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But other than that, it was kind of, hey, go nuts. There was a conference table in there that was just kind of a, cheapo, buy it at a home goods store type of thing. And then there was just a little buffet to the side, or cabinet that they brought from like their old law firm that didn't match. And it was just kind of, and he said, he's like, we never come in here. This is just placeholders. But I kind of took from that, we want a nice conference table and we want some kind of nice cabinet, buffet, sideboard, what have you.
Right.
But I knew how much wood was there, and I was like, man, I'm going to throw a few other ideas at them, just why not? Sure. But I mean, that really ended up being all it was. So I'm doing a conference table that is going to be 4 foot by 10 foot. And I'm actually going to do that out of 2 book matched slabs, but with the live edge only to the middle.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing that, and his wife started to get more involved as time went on, and she had a much greater opinion about what everything looked like, which was good because I really had no direction. It was kind of just like, make furniture. And it's like, okay,
Yeah, what could go wrong with that?
Yeah. Let me pull out 1,000 ideas. So she had a much stronger opinion about what she wanted to see, which was good. My original designs were very much, with the conference table, were very much kind of Nakashima, minimalist, kind of shaker, Japanese type of thing. But I always liked the idea of the live edge only to the middle, especially as a conference table, because I liked the idea of the outside, not getting into that, I guess, live edge thing to me, where it's like, do I sit where there's an indent? Do I sit where it pops out a little? I wanted
it's actually not, it's not terribly functional when you think about it. And especially in a business space, like, your suit jacket gets caught on the edge of the table. This is a law firm, right? And various other professional type organizations. Yeah. And then you wonder, like, how fragile is it? And do I lean on it? And yeah. So I can actually see that you're kind of protecting the live edge by putting it towards the middle.
And preserving,
also a cool look, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. I really did want something to have a live edge, just so there was that kind of historical, this was that tree that was out front, that was here before this building was here. And here's a live edge of that tree. But I also
think, just from a woodworking kind of trick perspective, certainly it's all coming from the same tree. So grain and color match is pretty easy, but you don't have to like you don't have to disguise the glue joint.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's there. You're hiding it in plain sight. So you don't, even if the slabs are, because again, 4 foot by 10 foot, you're talking 2 foot, essentially 10-foot slabs. This is the part of the trunk. Then it's going to be hard to kind of blend it together. So by
Right.
putting that live edge in the middle, blending is off the table. Literally, in this case, that's really cool.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to do, because this is a business and I did want it to be, beautiful but functional. I didn't want it to have this big gaping hole in the middle where the two live edges met. I ripped off, I guess, Greg Klassen, and I'm going to I'm going to inlay a piece of glass that will match the live edge. So
cool.
On the top, it'll be completely smooth. You won't have someone drop a pen down in the middle of the table or something.
Right.
So that was kind of the general idea. And then I proposed all sorts of different base designs. Like I said, all very kind of trestle-ish, many variations on that. And then the other thing was like just a really large sideboard to kind of take place of the cabinet. And everything I was proposing, like I said, was kind of a minimalist design, but everything was very square with some, rounds here and there. And the wife honestly didn't like any of it except the live edge top with the glass. And it was great because, I started this business 4 months before I took on this project. So this was my first client ever. And anything I'd made stuff before for anyone, it was friends and family. So there's no back and forth. There's no, negotiation or talking about design or I don't like that. And it really went well. And long story short, so she really wanted something that matched the period of the room in the picture with President Taft. The problem is everything in that picture was, Art Deco, bow front, everything, rounded everything, gloss, painted, possibly, metal, chrome type, just something I would have never thought to do with a red oak, I guess. You look at it and you think, walnut, mahogany, something is what she wants in a wood for this furniture. So it took some kind of digging in my brain to figure out what to do. But what I ended up going with is I'm doing a bow front buffet that is about 6 foot by 2 foot deep.
Okay.
And then the table is the live edge top didn't change, but then the bottom are these kind of 4 opposing curved pieces, curved legs, I guess you could say, that are going to be a stave construction and kind of just have like quarter round, I don't know how to say it, quarter round sections. And I also did a lot of metal work prior to getting into woodworking. So I'm going to tie all these kind of half round stave pieces with like a steel rib. So when you look at it from the outside, they'll look like they're floating. But they'll actually be tied together in sets of 2. So you'll have 2 on the right, 2 on the left. And they're going to be thin. They'll probably only be about an inch or an inch and a quarter thick. But then you'll have this, steel structure on the inside that will give it a lot of weight and give it a lot of support.
Yeah. Interesting. I do think you're right on the edge of that aesthetic though.
Yeah.
Deco idea.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was something, well, the problem is at least from my, I guess, young curmudgeon standpoint was, they did start getting into wanting to paint things. And I was very accommodating until then. And I kind of put my foot down and I said, okay, I feel like you guys are disrespecting this tree and I'm not going to do that. Like, you have this rare opportunity to have, the tops of the buffet and the table are just one piece. The sides of the buffet are just one piece. There's no panel glue ups. Everything is just, because all of these slabs are 30 plus inches wide and 12 foot long and 2 inches thick. So everything I can make is either huge book matches or just a single panel, like just a single piece. And I just said, never again are you going to have the opportunity in this building to have this furniture with no glue ups, really, other than joinery. Right. So I managed to convince him of that. I may still end up doing some staining. I'm hoping that they don't want that. But I do have a finish review with them in 2 weeks to, go over colors. I put together like 20 color samples and 20 finish, sheen samples. So I'm hoping that I can just do maybe some shellac and then some kind of varnish finish and just leave it natural. That's my hope. But right. I have a feeling I'll be doing a bit of a red tint somewhere. Just kind of knowing what the wife wants to see. I think that's probably going to be the case, which is okay. I just refused to paint anything.
Yeah. If you can still kind of see the grain, I think you're okay there. Not to mention, like, the mansion was built in, just my own research, 1915.
Yep.
So that tree was planted then. Like, that tree was growing when President Taft had lunch in that room.
Oh yeah, there's a picture. There's a picture in the mansion, or in the mansion of the mansion being built, and you can see the tree.
Yeah. That's, I mean, good for you to kind of, as you say, put your foot down and just say, look, this is, there's a disconnect here. There's furniture, and then there's furniture built from the tree that's been growing out in front of this building for generations. That's really fascinating.
Well, and the thing is once word got out that I was doing this, it was kind of surprising how many people through, Facebook or whatever that live in Howell, like kind of more elder generation of people, found me and messaged me like, oh, I love that tree. When I used to walk home from school when I was a little girl, I ate lunch under there or whatever. So the tree is a bigger deal than even I thought. And I think that was why I got so passionate about, showcasing that it's all from this tree.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I found in my own digging, because I was actually trying to see if I could find that picture you were talking about of Taft, because I wanted to see the furniture as well. And there is an article in the Livingston Daily. There you are, with your foot on the log, and there's something in this article about people who are really excited to hear this, and they quote your sawmiller in here as well, saying, counting the growth rings, this tree's been around since before the mansion itself. So yeah, that's really cool to kind of continue this story. That's going to be in that room for, a long time to come.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the actual milling side of things. I mean, this is a massive tree. So did he take it back to his place? Does he have a mobile mill? How did all that go down?
Yeah. So that's a story in itself. So like I said, when all of this was being finalized, it was the dead of winter here in Michigan. We lucked out in having a few kind of midwinter warm days in the 50s, and he doesn't have a mobile mill. So he had to, get it out of the ground and get it cut up into something that he could load on a trailer and get back to the mill. The problem was, during those warm days, he managed to get, everything from where it branched out up away from the property. And then the ground froze again.
Huh.
And it froze after 2 days of rain.
Oh, fun.
So
it really froze.
Yeah. So 30 foot of this tree was frozen to the ground. And, he's not terribly close. And he's also, it's a business for him. So he's not available every day. He's going all over the state or the Midwest picking up trees and to take back to the mill. So he wasn't available all the time. We lucked out, and a couple weeks, we had another one of those kind of warmer, rainy days. He was able to get the first main section of the trunk out. But the part that was still connected to the root ball was still frozen to the ground. And
wow.
Yeah, he managed to cut through, at the base of the trunk and get through it, but it was so frozen to the ground he couldn't get it out. So there was actually, I saw in the weather forecast, I think it was probably towards the beginning of March of this year, I saw, in the forecast, we were going to have like 2 days of rain and 50. So I call him and I said, Bob, you got to get out there on these 2 days and free that tree up and get it out of there, because, the mansion owners are saying, like, when are you going to get this eyesore out of here? And, whatever. And he's just like, I'm out of town for a week. I can't get it.
Oh, geez.
So I just tell him, I'm like, if I can get it off, like unstuck, is that good enough? Like, can you take it from there? And he says, sure. So I know nothing about moving a tree or anything. I mean, I have 2 acres of property here, and I've cut down some northern white pines around my property that are dying off and stuff. And I can cut it up into firewood. But I don't know the first thing about moving a 14-foot long, probably thousands of pound piece of red oak. But I knew it had to be done, because after that day, it was going to drop back down into the 20s, and it was just going to freeze to the ground again. So I took half day of work, and I went out there with a bunch of just chunks of scrap hardwood that I had kicking around, and a car jack and a shovel. And I just kind of, wedged my car jack in somewhere, moved it a little, shoved a piece of wood under there. And I just kind of worked around this thing for probably 2 hours until I got it to break free in the 2 kind of still frozen places and roll. And I got it to roll, all the way over kind of once away from the base of the tree. And it was such a relief, but man, it was a ton of work. Like, I can't even explain how much work it was, comparing it to something else. And the thing is every time it would shift a little, I'd want to run, because I mean, this thing, some of the spots I was at, if it shifted while I was there, it was crushing my leg.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I had no clue what I was doing. So I'm just kind of wedging stuff in and, and I have an engineering degree. So, I mean, I'm kind of looking at it like, okay, I can kind of balance these weights, and I'm looking at the physics of everything. But then, it's a tree. I don't know what it's going to do. But yeah, so I managed to break it free. And then he came and picked it up, I think like a week later when he got back into town, and took it back to the mill. So yeah, just getting the tree out from in front of the mansion was a 3-week process, probably. It was a lot. And he really underestimated the size and the weight. So, when he would come out, he'd come out expecting to get 3 or 4 big pieces, and he'd be able to get 2. And that would like max out his truck or his trailer or what. And he had a 1-ton truck and big trailer. And even then, it was fully alive before it came down. So it was wet. So that thing was crazy heavy.
Yeah, and frozen.
And
So there
and
was
frozen, exactly.
no draining of any free water in there. It was frozen in place.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, once you got the log moved and at least unstuck, like, I mean, how did he even get it anywhere? I mean, without a crane, I'm trying to see how you come in and lift that log to even get it onto the trailer. I mean, you look at, like, Matt Cremona and his log arch. I don't think this thing could do it. I don't think a log arch would do it.
No, I mean,
how did he even get the main part of the log off the property?
it was yeah. I mean, he doesn't have a log arch, but it was really just a big trailer and a heavy winch, and he just drug it up onto the trailer one piece at a time.
Wow.
Like I said, I don't know how much it weighed, but he managed to do it. And each of the trunk pieces were 14 foot long. And like I said, starting at the base, 40 something inches up to, I want to say, like 32 inches over that 20 plus foot stretch. So yeah, I can't even imagine how much it weighed at the time. Something insane, I'm sure.
By the way, the guy we're talking about, his name is Bob Allen. He runs Timbers to Treasures. Timberstotreasures.com, I believe, is his website. He's also on Instagram.
Yep.
I found it very easily just from your Instagram page, Garrett.
Yeah.
But yeah, anybody in Michigan, he's got lumber.
Oh yeah, he's got plenty of everything.
Yeah, this is a cool little find in and of itself. Anybody who's in the Michigan region probably wants to know about this guy. He's drying his own stuff and everything.
Yeah.
So, when did he actually begin sawing it? So we're talking December, right? When this thing, you first saw it sometime around November, and it was probably December or so when you had the initial conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So what are we in January, February at this point before the log has even been removed from the property?
Correct. Yeah. We started the cleanup, I'd say, towards the end of January. And then it wasn't, like I said, until probably the first week of March that final piece was taken out. And he really started milling it almost that next week. He started with the smaller branch pieces, stuff that was probably 20 inches around or so. Anything under, like, I can't remember what we talked about. I think 12 inches. I think anything under 12 inches we didn't use because it was just such an insane amount of wood. But yeah, he started milling pretty much right after that. And I think he milled the final piece, I want to say around May, I think, is when we were like done milling. And his whole thing is he had done a lot of research because he hadn't really ever worked with oak before, which is weird because we have so much oak in the area.
There's a lot of oak in Michigan.
Oh, I mean, it's everywhere. Like you can swing a, baseball bat and you'll hit an oak tree. I think to him, it was more just a business decision because once him and I started talking about the drying time, because that had to be part of my quote, right? Is I have to put an approximate delivery time for the furniture. And in order to do that, I need to know how long it's going to take before it's usable. So, I kind of, hey, Bob, how long do you think this is going to take? And his, first thing he kind of came across, and it's not that he'd never worked with oak before. He just didn't spend a lot of time with it. And mainly because it's so finicky to kiln dry. Like you have to air dry oak for months.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have, a very specific type of kiln, and he has a very nice kiln, it's just not the type that would do what it needs to do, I guess.
It looks like he's running an iDry. Is it a vacuum kiln?
Yeah.
An iDry vacuum kiln. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Just on his Instagram page.
Sure.
There's a picture right there.
Yeah. And basically, he had said any time in the past that he had tried to work with oak, if he went too soon into the kiln, it would just warp and check and break and just be a disaster. So he says I have to let this stuff air dry for 3 to 5 months at least before I put it in the kiln, or it's just gonna, explode. So, it was okay because I gave myself the entire year to deliver the furniture, but it was stressful just because I started doing the fast math and going, oh man, you're not going to get the first load in the kiln until September, and this is May. And but luckily with the iDry system and everything, it's only in there for a few weeks, and it's really not that big a deal.
Right. Wow. So all told, you said you came out with like 2,000 board feet, 2,500 board feet?
About 2,500. Yeah. We, the funny thing is, he runs the whole operation in his backyard, more or less. So he doesn't have a lot of storage space. So as we were milling, he was milling. I would just go visit and kind of look at the pieces as they came off the mill.
Right. Stay out of the way as much as possible.
Exactly. Just kind of be the guy standing in the corner. I would just kind of pick, like, we're going to keep this, we're going to keep this, we're going to keep this. And I really only ended up keeping probably 800 board foot, maybe, which at least keeping to go into the kiln, I should say. But the funny thing was, after we were done milling everything, he just kind of looked at me and said, where do you want me to put all the rest of this wood? And I just looked at him like, oh, well, I figured you would just keep it here, right? Because this is your business. And he came back with, no, I don't have the room for 1,600 board foot of red oak. So it's all at my house now. And so if anyone needs any air dried red oak, anywhere between 1.25 inches and 3 inches, feel free to contact me on Instagram, because I have, I don't know, 1,200 to 1,600 board foot of red oak, stacked up. I made a spot for it. I covered it. I sealed the ends, but it's more than I'll use in a lifetime.
What was the thickness?
I have 6 pieces at 3 inches, and then everything else is about 1.5 inches. Wow. Anywhere from 8 to 12 foot long, and anywhere from 10 to 20 inches wide. Jeez. So, I think chair makers maybe would want all that air dried
red oak.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of Windsor spindles.
Exactly.
Sitting in there, and some bow arms and things like that. Well, you never know. I assume, did you include chairs? Aren't included in your deliverable, are they?
No.
Okay. Well, see, there you go. There could be a follow-up. If you want some chairs,
right?
I got an additional 1,000 board feet of oak over here. We can make some chairs.
Well, it was funny in the original quote. I quoted making them kind of like an entryway sitting bench, like a Windsor style sitting bench, and they were interested in that. But I was trying to be like, hey, look, red oak, Windsor, this is a thing, but no, they weren't interested in that. But yeah, that was originally on the quote, was like a nice, Windsor style bench.
Right. Well, you can maybe find another customer for that.
Oh,
certainly. Yeah. The lumber is yours. You'll be really familiar with red oak.
Yes.
Going forward at this point. So, did you have a lot of kind of input? I know you said you, as I said, kind of stay out of the way during the sawing, but did you and Bob kind of talk about the sawing and the plan for sawing the log? I mean, at that point, you knew you were going to need at least some big slabs for the table, correct?
Yes.
So you could at least say, okay, I need to at least have 10-foot sections, or probably more like 12-foot sections, just to be sure, and all that.
Yeah.
How did that go? How was the actual planning the sawing going?
So
how much of a hand in that did you have?
I think, as I was thinking about what we may talk about, this is something that I thought, as far as a lesson learned, I should have had much more involvement. The thing about Bob is that he's an excellent sawyer and has plenty of great wood, but he's not a furniture maker. So
yeah, good point.
I couldn't be there. I have a full-time job. He's cutting, at 1:00 on a Tuesday. I can't be there for that. So a lot of the cuts that he made, I would have made differently, just because some of the most kind of pretty live edge parts, he didn't cut thick enough for a tabletop.
Oh no.
Like he cut them for lumber, and they're cut about 1.5 inches, which is good. But once you mill them and everything, you're probably looking at 1.25 inches, maybe an inch, which for a huge conference table is just so thin. So that was one thing that, if anyone were to do this, really make sure you're there when they're cutting them, or that the sawyer you're working with maybe has some experience either making furniture or working with furniture makers, so that they're kind of looking at it with the eye of these would be really pretty for this, or this would be really great for that. I did stipulate, like you said, I'm going to need, cut this whole section in 2.25 inch by 12 foot, because I'm going to want to pick from that whole section for the tabletop, that sort of thing. And, but like I said, when you're looking at it as just a log, you can't really envision exactly what it's going to look like when it's cut. So
yeah. And it is one of those things where, well, as you say, you can't be there, you've got a job to get to. And a lot of times it's decisions being made on the fly. And what you're talking about is not an uncommon situation. It's a lot of work to saw up a log. Who has time to build furniture?
Right.
My job is a sawyer, not furniture maker. There are some these days that, that run a Wood Miser or, a Timber King or something like that, wanted to mill their own lumber, and maybe they now are a sawyer, but used to be a furniture maker. But more often than not, at least in my circles that I run with in very large commercial operations, these guys have never built anything. They just make boards all day long. And there's a lot of decisions that get made. And many times it's all about yield, getting commercially in demand cuts and the best quality out of those. Well, 20-inch wide stuff is not commercially in demand. Moreover, FAS grade says you have to have a 6-inch by 8-foot cutting. So why would I bother to cut a 15-inch wide board when I can cut it into 2 and have 2 FAS boards, which is going to net me a better profit in the long run? So a lot of these guys are thinking, also, frankly, it's just easier to put in the kiln. It's easier to dry, all of that stuff.
Sure.
But it can also be a reason to stipulate, because remember, technically this log is yours. Like you've, for lack of a better term, contracted with the property owners.
Mm-hmm.
I guess technically the log is theirs. But the sawyer does not own the log. The sawyer is charging you to do this. So you have every right to say, look, this is what needs to be done. And I do think that's where a lot of this kind of just through sawn, slab sawn lumber makes a good sense, because then you, the woodworker, have kind of these blank slate slabs that you can then dissect and turn into furniture parts from there.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it sound like he somehow didn't do a good job. He did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
But like I said, when I started, for example, I just got the first load from the kiln 2 weeks ago, and that's all of the stuff that's around 1.25 to 1.5 inches. So that's like my primary build material. That's 90% of everything will be made out of that. But a couple of the slab pieces that came with that, if he would have cut them at 2.5, 2.25, just those 2 pieces, those would have been the tabletop. You know what I mean? So like if I would have been there, I would have saw it and been like, that's the tabletop right there.
Right.
Cut those at 2.5 inches. And he just didn't do that, which is okay because I didn't tell him to. I said this chunk cut 2.5. But yeah, I mean, you're totally right, and I think that once again is something to pass on to anyone thinking about doing this: is really make sure you're specific in the cuts, and really make sure you're maybe even if you can try to organize the time that cuts are made so that you can be there.
Yeah.
Him, I just kind of said, yeah, man, whenever you got time, put it up there, let it rip, let's go. So it was never like a, hey, I can I come out? Can we do it Tuesday at 4 and I can be there? It was like, okay, I can cut Friday, whether you're here or not. That's what I'm cutting.
Yeah. You never know. Much is lost for want of asking. He may have been able to coordinate with you, but it is hard. Like you said, it's this huge log and just trying to wrap your head around. So here's the other point. You were fortunate that you actually had a commission. Like you had an intended purpose for this log. I need to build this table, I need to build this sideboard.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are not in that situation. Here's a tree. I want boards out of it. And maybe, I don't know, I might be able to build this, or a lot of times it's just lumber. And we don't know, what the part sizes would be. And it becomes even more complex at that point. So then you're deferring to the judgment of the sawyer and saying, well, get me the best yield out of it from there. So what you're detailing is an incredibly common situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if there were any kind of rule of thumb, I don't know there's such a thing as a rule of thumb when it comes to sawing logs. If there was anything to come out of it, probably thicker is better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Saw everything, I would say 10 quarter or greater, just because there's a stability aspect in there, especially if that board, if you don't use it for a while, it's going to be in a lot better shape if it was, 10 quarter, 8 quarter, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as the woodworker, even the weekend woodworker knows about resawing, knows about breaking down parts. And I guess unless you were trying for, quartered cuts or something like that, through sawn, plain sawn, give me as wide as possible and as thick as possible that I can still move. Keeping in mind that in your particular case with that size of a log, a 10 quarter, 30 inch wide slab, I don't think you can move. I certainly couldn't move, not with my setup. I don't have a forklift or any of that type of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, luckily I have a tractor so I can move something, but not it's pretty heavy. Going back really quick to your previous point that you made, though, I will say the one nice thing that he did do overall was that he pretty much kept everything as a slab, which is really, really great. That now I have all these kiln dried slabs in my garage where I store all the lumber. And, for like this bow front buffet, I was able to sort through and I found, all these single pieces where the grain curve is going to match the curve of the bow front, so all of my flat pieces, all of that grain is going to be, right in line with the design. And like you were saying, being able to have the commission, being able to design everything beforehand and then say, I'm going to need this for this and this for that. It was really great to, get everything as just these huge chunks. And then I have a bunch of forms that I made out of masonite, basically. And I can just lay them on top of these slab pieces and just, move them around until I see like, oh, okay, yeah, that's going to be really great for the top of the sideboard and, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think, I've said this a lot of times, especially to like some of my hand tool school students. That's my absolute favorite part of a project is taking the raw lumber and like fitting the parts into it, and going for that grain and color match and figuring out, you're building chest of drawers. Can I get consistent grain through all the drawer fronts? Or, I've got a curve here. Where do I have curve in the grain and how do I play with that? that is so much fun. And I think, takes a piece from good to great when you can really embrace the grain. And when you have a tree of this significance, this historical significance, it's almost an imperative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
you pay attention to the grain as much as possible.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like I
Really
said
cool.
earlier, I mean, I just really, in the back of my mind, every time I'm sorting through the boards or when I was doing the design work, the whole time I'm saying to myself, what's the best way to showcase that this was one tree on, like you said, on the drawer fronts or on the top, the buffet top or the sides. I mean, the sides uh, are going to be 2.25 inches thick of the case because I'm going to, you know, mill the curve because the bow front wraps all the way around. It's not just on the front, it's the sides too. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm, going to dovetail this case together and then mill the sides to match the curve of the top. And knowing that I have to have it be, about 2 inches thick in order to have, a 3/4 inch reveal on the front and still have the right radius on the sides vertically to match the top and the base and have it all, kind of work together. Is just, it's really huge when it came to milling and everything. I knew I had to have this many pieces at this thickness in order to make my design work.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's such an exciting project, though. On the whole, I mean, looking at the log and just again, big straight log.
Mm-hmm.
How has the wood been? I know you haven't had too much time to actually work with it, but like you never know until
Yeah.
you crack open the log what's going to be in there. How do the boards look? I mean, is it clear? I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of
It's
what is it? What's the inner to the tree like? I guess.
it's gorgeous. I mean, I feel like, uh, you know, I am as self-deprecating as they come. So I feel like I'm not worthy to be working with this wood. It is absolutely gorgeous. I just took the two, and I'll text you a picture of them. But I just took the first two pieces to my local mill house because I don't have a big enough joiner to make, the top and the bottom of this buffet are 22.5 inches wide.
Wow.
So I needed them milled, and these are out of the kilns, so they're ready to go. I took them over there yesterday in a rough, cut condition. And as I was helping the guy get them, I'm on the other side of the planer. As I'm bringing them out of the planer, even this guy this place, Armstrong Millworks, by where I live, it's been in business forever. And the guys that work there have worked there forever. And even he took a second and he was like, this might be the prettiest red oak I've ever seen.
Nice.
Yeah. And I just kind of looked at him, and in my head, I'm like screaming, like, you're not worthy. But I just kind of looked at him and I was like, yeah, I know. Like, this is a lot of pressure to not screw this up because this wood is so gorgeous.
Yeah, I just found a couple of pictures of the bow front on your Instagram. The what is this? Is this a? I'm not sure what this piece is, but I can see the bent form that you have here. It looks like it was kerf bent.
Oh, that's
yeah.
that is the base to the bow front buffet.
Okay.
So
I'm just looking at the ray fleck around the side, and yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it. Well, if you go, not to shamelessly self promote, but if you go on my YouTube page, you can see I have 2 videos about the whole design process of the table and the bow front. So
Nice.
that will go. If anyone's interested, you can go on there, and I walk through all the 3D model, of each one to kind of show what everything's going to look like in the end.
Yeah. No, I'll actually link to that in the show notes because there are woodworkers listening to this, so we're all
Sure.
like, okay, I want to get my head around this design.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So at this point, you really have just started working with the wood. What are you thinking delivery wise, and what kind of communication have you had back to the client?
So I have, communication to the client to me as someone who's been a client of many things in the past, communication to me is paramount. I hate when I don't know what's going on. So, basically every month since the tree left, I've just sent them a quick, hey, this is where we're at. And that seemed to work out really well. I have a meeting with them in 2 weeks to go over finishes. And like I said, I have probably 20 plus little blocks of red oak with all sorts of dyes and finish options. So I'm kind of doing everything I can without needing to know a finish right now. Mm-hmm. So I have this base to the bow front buffet all glued up and done. And then I have to put the top and the bottom just to the base, because the base is going to be separate from the case. I'm going to kind of, I guess, attach the case to the base of the cabinet. So that will be kind of in the waiting phase probably after this weekend. And then I'll move on to the stave construction of the table base. And I'm also still waiting for all this 2.5 inch stuff to come out of the kiln, which still has about a month. So then I'll kind of being in a holding pattern. But I think, barring any personal issues or work stuff, I told them the approximate delivery date would be December 31st. So I think I'm still on track to do that. I can't foresee any reason why, other than kind of just probably personal blocks. Like, this is the third version of this bow front buffet base, because I did one where I did the form and the kerf, and I just totally mucked it up and threw it away. And then I did a second one, and I got the whole thing done. And then as I was working on the little finish samples, I was staring at it for over an hour, and I noticed it was lopsided by about 1 inch. So the radius was high on one side, but I had already had it completely glued up and done. So I had to scrap that and start on a third one. And the third one is perfect. So, I'm done. But just that alone, once again, just being kind of nights and weekends, set me back 2 weeks, probably. But hopefully, Well,
look at it this way. At least you have plenty of wood.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I keep telling myself is like, hey, man, it's okay. You've got, I have right now in my garage, I have 660 board foot, which is, itself is enough to make 3 of these sideboards probably.
Right.
So yeah,
how much is still in the kiln?
Another 500, I think, is in the kiln.
Wow.
And then that's the end of it.
What's interesting, do you have any idea of, I know you guys discarded, fair bit of the branches, anything under 12 inches, I think you said. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming, did Bob just make firewood out of that? Or
yeah, he just, any of the real little stuff, he just chipped it up. And then anything under 12 inches, I'm pretty sure he just bucked it into firewood.
Do you have any idea what kind of waste factor came out of the log? Looking at the grain that I can see, this looks like a very clear tree. And that central bowl was so tall, there's no branching at all.
Right.
Was any of it not good? How much of it didn't make it into boards? Any idea?
I would say very little. I don't have an actual number, but just going by what I saw when I was there when he would be milling, and going by what I have in my air dried stock and kiln dried, I would say anything that was used to just make a flat face to start as a reference on the mill,
right?
That was probably the only waste.
Yeah, and half of that was cambium layer. So.
Right, and wow. You're completely correct in this. The first 30 foot of this tree was absolutely clear. And there's no old, grown over branches. There's nothing. It is completely clear tree. The lumber is just astonishing.
Did you ever get a final ring count to determine the age of the tree? I know that article that I found where they quoted Bob, he said, we won't know until we can roll the tree over and count the rings. I just wonder if anybody ever did that.
Yeah,
find out how old the tree is.
that interview was done while that last piece was still frozen to the ground. So,
Right.
so
Yeah, I put 2 and 2 together on that one.
so we couldn't get the count. We did our best to, and we ended up around 160 years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So what's your, again, you may not know the answer to these, but what's like the growth ring per inch in like the heartwood, like the center parts of some of those big slabs? Have you been able to, I mean, it must be really fine grain.
It is. I couldn't tell you the growth ring per inch. I could certainly update you when I get the next batch of slabs, because those are from the largest part of the trunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you right offhand, but it's very tight. I mean, if you look at
It's one of those fun buzzwords that have made it into the general nomenclature of architects these days.
Okay.
I now get specs at work where we need this species and it has to be this many growth rings per inch.
Oh, wow.
And I just want to know, like, who started this? Because I want to go smack you.
Yeah, it's not even something I was thinking about, to be honest.
Yeah. It's and I think more than anything, like, it's not like anybody has like a number in mind. They just want, to think, oh, it's old growth or whatever.
Right.
But here is, if we can kind of land the plane on this story, and I think you're right. It's a fantastic kind of wrap up. What I like about this is you're not the Sawyer. You're like me. You're just a weekend woodworker.
Yeah.
Doesn't have really the capacity. I'm surprised you moved a thing. And thank goodness you didn't hurt yourself. But by kind of reaching out to a Sawyer you had already done some business with, kind of partnering with them, we were able to, and partnering with the landowner, you were able to, first of all, get the rights to use the tree. You were able to remove the tree and get it sawn into boards. And now it's up to you, no pressure, to turn it into furniture. But even beyond this commission, you have a massive amount of lumber that is going to continue to tell this story. So, 10 years from now, you're still going to be building stuff, with McPherson oak. You're going to have a whole line of furniture, the McPherson line, that continues to tell this story. Now, I do think one of the other kind of morals, if you will, that we can get out of this is when we do reclaim, because I don't know what else to call this, when we're able to utilize an historical tree like this, the payoff is huge because you get grain like that. You get, little to no waste factor from the log because that tree has been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
That's not going to be as common, when we start talking about a lot of the urban lumber stories that I've been having in previous episodes, where the tree may be 40 years old or, maybe 60 years old. You may not quite have that same luck. Now, let's be fair. Northern red oak is particularly agreeable. It's a long, straight bowl. Generally, you don't get a whole lot of gnarly defects and things like you would in walnut or something. Oak and maple, nice and clear. So that's a great example there that you have. But I just love that this is a story that's going to continue to be told for quite a bit of time in the future, and it still remains the same that you're just a regular woodworker. And to do this, I'm trying to get philosophical here, but to do this idea of urban logging and local sawyers and not letting these trees go to waste, you don't have to be Matt Cremona to pull it off.
Sure.
You don't have to have, a telehandler and, a trailer you built yourself and all that fun stuff. And there are people out there that can help you.
And the thing is too, being a weekend woodworker, my shop's in my basement. I don't have like a huge shop.
Just getting the slabs to the shop is difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I have to come down 2 flights of stairs with a turn, and I'm going to have to get these 12 foot by 24 inch or so slabs down into my shop to bake the table. And then I'm going to have to assemble the entire table in my dining room. upstairs, because if I assembled it in my shop, I wouldn't be able to get it out. You know,
Right.
so
I did that. I did that with a king size bed. I mean, fortunately, beds by design are meant to be knocked down because they don't fit through anything. But I assembled it on my workbench, and then I realized I had, the expression "painted yourself into a corner."
Yeah.
I had assembled myself into a corner. I couldn't get out of my shop
Right.
until I took apart the bed. I was like, "Whoops, this was poorly planned."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just make sure your designs account for the fact that you got to get it through doorways and up stairwells and around corners. And yeah, that's a whole other thing. Not to mention, where is that air dried stuff? Like, fortunately you said you have some land.
Yes.
But how have you stored it?
So I actually made a very valid effort to store it well. So
Sure.
I mentioned I have a tractor, so I was able to kind of level off a decent chunk, brought in I don't know, 10 yards of gravel, and then just kind of built a makeshift lean-to. And then I have them stacked and stickered. And then I have just kind of some roofing, like sheet metal roofing on top of them with a tarp over everything. But there's still plenty of airflow. Everything's stacked and stickered, weighted. I tried to do the best I can, because I looked at it like you said, right? I'm going to have a lot of this McPherson oak to use for future projects. And I've already thought of that, right? Like, I've got enough here for a dining table and chairs, and I've got enough here for this. And maybe my kids are going to want something 20 years from now. So I wanted to make sure it was all still, very usable.
Sure.
And yeah, luckily I have a couple acres, so, I was able to make that work.
Well, keep an eye on it as you move into next summer.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you're going to have bug issues. I mean, it's fortunate the tree felled when it did, and then it went into the deep freeze for a while, and then it was all sawn and such. So the dried stuff is not a problem, but the air dried stuff, it's one of those things you just want to keep an eye on. Little sawdust piles, make sure you don't have any bugs.
Yeah.
Because obviously red oak and the powder post beetle are a thing.
Sure.
A very big thing. But it's also interesting. I've seen some studies, and I've also seen these studies refuted at the same time, but a lot of the old growth trees haven't been hit quite as hard because so much of the tree is heartwood, bitter tasting heartwood. And the powder post beetles are, while there's nice sugary sweet younger trees nearby, they've kind of left a lot of the old growth trees alone, or haven't bothered to go past the sapwood or the cambium layer at all.
Yeah.
So a lot of these old growth trees, you saw them and like you have this beautiful, clear, straight grain with no infestation whatsoever. But now that the tree is sawn and it is, dropping moisture left and right, I mean, just stand next to a sawn red oak board. It smells.
Oh yeah.
It smells great, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But that smell is essentially off-gassing and all that stuff that bugs like. You could have just hung out a big neon sign. In other words, come, buffet, all you can eat.
Right.
So, not to freak you out, but just pay attention to it, and the occasional treatment with some dilute borax might be a good idea halfway through the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly keep. I mean, I do keep an eye on it. Every time I mow the lawn or something, I drive by it and I'll, glance at it lovingly. So
pat it.
Yep. Rub it. Talk.
Give it a little hug.
Talk to it.
A hug when no one's looking.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it. No, I think that's fantastic. And this, like you said, it really puts a pretty bow on the end of this, because this is what we're talking about. I mean, of course you're going to take care of that because of the story now.
Yeah.
Because of, as you said to the Myers, the respect that this tree deserves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.
So cool. Good luck in getting everything done. I'm certainly going to be paying close attention to your Instagram and YouTube and everything to see how all the whole thing comes together. Can't wait to see kind of it in place. In the Taft room, whatever the heck they're going to call it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
No, I mean, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. and taking the time to talk to me. This is really great. And, I really hope people check it out. To me, it's kind of this dream project that when I reached out to them, I thought there's no way this will ever happen because I'm just some guy.
Right.
And, I lucked out, and I'm just really excited.
I think
for everyone to see it.
A lot of us feel the same way, and the reality is the people who lose the tree are in the same situation. Like, oh crap, what am I going to do with this now? How much is this going to cost me to remove? At the worst case, where they just see it as a nuisance. You were very fortunate that while it is, a nuisance and an eyesore to have a fallen tree in the front, they also recognized, this was important. We can't just like throw it away.
Yeah.
So I think we, as the woodworkers, have an obligation to make that phone call, to send that email when we see that tree down. I have a similar story from a woodworker up in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, in kind of Amish country, Lancaster County, PA, who every day on his way to work, he drove by a cherry tree that had this enormous burl on it.
Mm-hmm.
And he always thought, wow, I bet that's incredible. And then one day he was driving and he was following like a tree removal truck, and that tree removal truck stopped in front of that house. And he was kind of like, oh, good Lord, to the point where at lunch, he then left his office and went to see. And sure enough, they were taking down that tree. And he immediately like marched up the path, knocked on the front door and said, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with this tree?
Yeah.
And fortunately he was able to salvage the burl. And if you go to this guy's shop in Lidditz, he has like stacks of, burls tend to be kind of round-ish.
Mm-hmm.
They are 72-inch diameter, 6-foot diameter burls.
Wow.
So imagine like, ingrain cookies, because that's all burl is just crazy massive ingrain.
Yeah.
He has these burl cookies that are 6 foot in diameter. And I think he's got like 10 or 12 of them.
That's wild.
Stacked up. And he's built several pieces from them, but it's the same situation you're in where he's got this massive amount of lumber and he's just going to kind of use it as, the project. When the project is worthy, he will use that type of thing. And it was the same situation. It was just kind of like drove by it every day and thought, I don't know, who am I? I'm just some guy, but he went and knocked on the door,
mm-hmm.
and, the rest is history. So there's the takeaway, folks who are listening to this.
Yeah.
You may just be some guy, but the person who owns the property, who had the tree, is also some guy.
Right.
Who's trying to figure out what am I going to do with this, 17-ton log that's out in front of my house right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, fantastic. Well, congratulations, Garrett.
Thank you.
And good luck with the rest of this project. And I'm so glad you reached out to me, because I think it's a great story, and one that's not done yet. So I'm anxious to follow the rest of it. So that in mind, how can people follow your progress on this? How do they find you?
Yeah. Instagram is really where I'm at the most, usually every day, every other day. So that's at HMR_Woodcraft. And then my website is hmrwoods.com. And YouTube is just HMR Custom Woodcraft. So
nice. The
links are on the website to everything. But yeah, Instagram is where I'm at almost every day. I usually try to get an hour in the shop every day. And this is literally all I'll be working on for the next 3 months. So, you'll see plenty of updates.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, again, thanks for your time today. Thanks for the story. And I can't wait to see how you wrap all this thing up.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.